Well, welcome everybody. My name is Robert Zalotic. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Adaptec. Adaptec's one of the sponsors and kind of the main drivers behind the microservices implementation meetup. So welcome. How many people are here for the first time? No, you're not. Okay, so we got lots of people who have been here before, which is great. Awesome. I want to first of all thank Elastic Path and Matt Bishop, who's also our speaker today. We're very pleased to have Elastic Path, among other people, as both clients and generous sponsors of the space. In terms of, just so you know, this is our last meetup of the year. We don't have any more meetups until January. We're trying to get a good lineup of speakers and a mix of active and interactive, as well as kind of speakers for the new year. So keep your eyes on the meetup. We want to wish you happy holidays and hope you guys have a great Christmas. And now I want to turn it over to Matt Bishop, who's the workshop. Yes, sorry, one more thing. In January 18th and 19th, we have 2 workshops that we're putting on. One's called Delivering Effective Microservices, which is sort of more intermediate, and so you'll get to do event storming as well as build a product. In the deep dive, hands-on implementation of microservices workshop, it's basically all-day coding and deeper topics, more advanced topics around that. So if you have any questions for us, we've got 4 people from Adaptec here today. Robert Rebel, our CTO, the CEO, Adam Dimitruk, and Alex Moxon, and myself. So if you have any questions about any of those. Nicola, sorry, Nicola. sorry, Nicola in the back corner. So Matt's speaking today on CQRS and ReST. He's the chief architect here at Elastic Path, and thank you so much, Matt.
Sorry, just got shocked. Thank you all for coming out. I gave this talk at a, where's start? There it is, at a ReST conference earlier this year. And it's basically, I'm glad to be talking to this audience, because talking to the ReST audience, I had to explain a lot about CQRS. And, but it was interesting to go through the experience to really lay out in what I understood about ReST in simple terms. So hopefully CQRS, excuse me, in simple terms. So, I'm not actually the chief architect, but thank you for the promotion. Whatever. We do have a team working on next generation products and architectures, and Elastic Path is a headless commerce API. And what that means is people buy it because they want to put it in places that you touch as a customer. And this may surprise you, but systems in the store that do commerce usually have nothing to do with the systems on the web or even the systems in the mobile. And this becomes painfully obvious when you can't take a coupon from the web and use it in the store. It really irritates people. So they like our platform because with this commerce API and the fact that we don't actually present out storefronts and things, they can put commerce in all these places. And what you do in one place shows up in the other place. And that's basically why we have this API. The thing about these experiences, those things that you touch, they're made by lots of people and lots of teams. And I like to say that teams are basically tribes, and in enterprise, we all think about any place you've worked, it's more than 5 people. And there's going to be groups that form into tribes about doing the HR tribe and the services tribe and the support tribe. And that's just how it works. That's how people are. What keeps them all working together is their culture is shared. And the way you share your culture usually is through the language you use, the words. In fact, the bigger you get, the more important it is that the words you use to describe what you do are reflected across all the people across the entire enterprise around the world. So what this means really is big enterprises are shared cultures. And their big advantage and why they're big and why they continue to succeed is they're able to communicate that culture through the people. If you can't communicate what your business means in Mexico the same as you can in Japan, you probably aren't actually in the same business, you just happen to have the same name. So the kinds of customers that we have are these kinds of customers. They have large groups of people with cultures they're trying to communicate. They have a shared language. This is what makes them distinct from the others. So this is a quiz. Who here can match the term to the company? So I'm gonna, how do we do this? You wanna do it? We all know this. This is leaked. This is an example of language leaking out into the popular culture. They have actually more words inside to describe things. It doesn't leak out. But this is important. They pride themselves on teaching themselves. Apparently, the president of Disney's got cast member on his business card, right? That's how important it is to create this particular feeling. Why does Walmart call these rollback prices? Because they don't want to call them sales. They think it's the culture they're trying to communicate is they're doing you a favor by making it cheaper, right? They're rolling down the price so that it's even more accessible to the customer. And that's an important concept for them. So the Commerce API has got to communicate this language because remember those tribes of people making interfaces, they need to understand what these words are. They need to understand when you say cast member, that means something other than a play, right? It could mean anybody. It could be the guy, making the burgers or the lady cleaning the rooms, all the way up to the people driving the ships or whatever. That word means something. So the API would be a natural place for that to come out, right? You should be able to see these words that the business use in the API you actually are interacting with to create those digital experiences, the watch app, the mobile app, the TV thing, the website. Problem is, we don't do that. We have a retail-oriented API, and it's something that we've actually struggled with quite a bit because we have to teach people these terms, and when we say this, then you're going to map that in your head to that, right? When we say item, you call that a product, and then this company over here, you go, when we say item, you say restaurant reservation. So you have to teach them this mapping. And for a small organization, this is okay. I got 100 people in the dev team. You can go through the effort and teach them all this. But some projects are quite large. And there's 100 people coming and going every week. And you got to reteach that crowd. Every time they come in, they got to start working on this project. They just arrived yesterday. Now they got to be productive. They don't know what an item is, right? They've learned, maybe guessed. They certainly don't know what a customer is. So they have to make these mental mappings themselves. And it's a very imperfect experience because, people left their own devices are going to make guesses, and guesses are often wrong. So we've been really struggling to come up with a way to cross this chasm or to bridge this problem in ours. And so I'm going to talk to you about some things that you probably already know in this group, but I'll go through anyway. Domain-driven design, as I understand it, is basically really focused on this concept of creating domains that have ubiquitous language. So the terms in the software match the terms in the business. So if you're going to build a cast member, timekeeping system, you're going to use cast member in the actual software itself. You're not going to create an abstract employee class and then teach people that's what we mean when we say cast member. You're going to use those words directly in the language. They actually have actions on them. So a domain object might be like the car. If you read DDD books, there's always a car that comes up. So here's some examples of methods on a car. You've got to, press gas pedal and read speedometer and apply brakes, stuff like that. Put fuel in the car, 40 liters of gas. Gas. It's not diesel. So the thing is, though, about DDD is very different than other kinds of systems is the data you put in isn't the data you get out. You send it values, but you don't read those values back. Like you send it these 3 commands, the stuff in red. I want to change gear to third. I want to press the gas pedal hard. I want to brake. What am I doing to the speedometer? Well, it's changing. It's giving you back a value that you really couldn't calculate from the inputs that go into it. So the model you're expressing in DDD is not a data in, data out model. It's a behavior model. You're trying to model the domain as it actually is. So the thing about the ubiquitous language is it's really not about sharing data. It's about sharing concepts. You don't create a big data model in DDD and teach everyone about the data model everywhere you go. You figure out the concepts are and you make your software reflect those concepts. Okay, CQRS, next topic. There's a quiz later. It's over beers. It should be fun. You guys know what this hopefully means, but what it's come to mean to me is it's really about state change. The command is a different thing than the reading of it, the query of it, the views of it. And the command execution, it creates an event. These are past tense things that happened. They're immutable. David Clark is here. He's my favorite example that I love to use is eating a taco, right? When you eat a taco, what? Taco eaten is an event. You can't uneat the taco, right? You can issue a command to create a new event. May not get the taco out, but you can sure try. So they're two separate things. It's like pressing the gas pedal and reading this boner. Just they have something to do with each other, but it isn't obvious looking at the data itself. So if we were to change our model to a CQRS type of DDD model, look a little bit different. Your commands, the things do the action words would be commands, change gear to third, press gas pedal hard, something like this. I mean, it may not be exact this, but it's be kind of close, right? These are imperative commands about how to change the state of the system. I want to do these things. The thing I've grayed out, read speedometer and read fuel gauge, those are views, and they're not part of the C part. That's the Q part. So the thing about commands is, if all goes well, they produce events, right? If I want to change gear to third, and I can go to third gear because I'm not in third gear, or I'm not in first gear, then I can actually make it there. And so the event that comes out is gear has changed to third gear. Now, you might think that an event is the same data as the command, because most of the time it looks that way. We've had many arguments in our group about they're just the same dang thing. Can we please just create a thing class and then one's called command and one's called event and we'll be done, right? It'll be so much easier than copying all this code. The thing is, it's not really how models work, right? The event, the command I put down here is I want to put 40 liters of gas in my car. I've punched into the gas machine, 40 liters, please. My car's not completely empty. It comes back and says, you got 35 liters. The data in is not the data you get out. It's not the same data that the command has and what the event produces. It often is, but it's not always that way. This is an important distinction. How do you find these events? Event storming, this is not a real event storming. This is a play one. Real ones are much bigger, but you basically have, you're trying to drive out a couple things. One is the stuff in blue are the commands. The stuff in orange are the events. And by working backwards, in this case, it's a salad making process, you're going to discover all the things that have to happen in order for a salad to emerge. And along the way, you find the workspaces, the aggregates, or whatever we're going to call these, we're still arguing about this one, where these things are applied. So chopping veggies, I'm going to do it on a chopping board. I'm not going to do it in the salad bowl, right? Some of this stuff is obvious, and hopefully all of it's obvious. But I'm not going to toss the salad in the chopping board. I'm going to toss the salad in the salad bowl. And once you've tossed the salad, you can't untoss it, right? So you may have a business rule in here where you can only toss it one time or something like that. But this is where what you're going to do happens. And it always happens with business people and the people who are going to build at the same time. And from this, you can take a picture. You've got a pretty good idea what kind of a system you're going to build. The query, the Q part. The queries are actually the weird, in my mind, fuzzy, bizarre quirk of the system. It's really, we've discovered it's three things. There's a projection, which is sort of the canonical example of what a query is. It's a way to project out the values you're finding in the system. It's also a policy. It's a trigger that causes something to happen. And you use queries as well to interact with the external world. So a query can be a projection. How many of you have been to a movie? Yeah, okay, right. Stupid question. No, David, no, okay. So when you go to a movie, what do you think you're doing? You think you're watching a movie, right? Well, you're watching a movie, but you're also listening to a movie. And you're also kind of smelling the theater and eating the popcorn. There's a lot of things that go into a projection to give you the experience you're looking for. It's not just one thing. It could be many things. And in the case of the sound, it could be 15 of them all around your head and a big, huge one behind the screen. In fact, we'll pay extra for more of those, right? The quality of the projection you want depends on getting more events coming at you to create this experience. So the way you create projections, CQRS, you subscribe to different kinds of events, you bring them back together, and you present out an interpreted view. The thing that people always catch on, smart people usually, is, hey, wait a minute, that's eventually consistent. You don't get that right away, and you're right. But in practice, it turns out you get it almost immediately. So the eventually consistent problem is not as big as people like to think it is or imagine it is. It's actually okay. And usually when you run a projection or you consume a projection, the state of that value, if it doesn't exactly match the command state, usually it's fine. Now that, for you guys, a little side here, that's an argument I get every time I talk about this with REST people. So I had to do a little aside there about it, but around the audience. Okay, speedometer projections. In REST, you would call a REST API like something like this, but you would basically be consuming events that are a series of events from the first one through Let's start. So this is a quiz. Another person who wants to run the quiz. Alex, thank you for volunteering. If I were to run these events through my projection and I were to call get speedometer, what would the value of miles per hour be?
I guess it depends on what's happening in the JSON objects.
It depends if you put the brake on it if you're on a hill.
Well, the important thing here is the state of the engine is stopped, right? And then I'm going to send some events. I'm actually pushing on that gas pedal really hard because I'm 5. I don't have the keys. I'm just going to hammer away at it. But if I look at the speedometer, I'm only going 0. I'm not doing any speed because the state of the system is computed from the actual events that have occurred in the domain itself. Queries can be policies. Policy is a reaction to something that's happened. So if I have a policy in my coffee shop that if someone offers me a $20 bill that's fake, I should call the police. These are the workflow chains of a CQRS system. They can decide maybe not to call the police if the person there's other events like gun shown or girlfriend offering the fake $20, whatever it might be to cause your thing. But basically, you chain your things together through queries that are called policies. This is why it's weird. I think the word query actually is not a good one for this, but call police is a command. You're right. Policies do not generate events. They just generate commands.
Okay. It's basically what they either call process managers or citing, right? That's what you're talking about. People don't like those terms.
I can't remember the guy who came up with the term policy, but he's wrote a really nice blog about it. It makes sense for our business, so we're using policy.
Basically make decisions based on incoming events.
Yeah. And it could be, you could have a policy that listens for multiple events, just be like every other kind of query, and make a decision to issue a command based on the state of like 5 or 6 events. So you can do complex event processing with this model.
It's nice. We call them process managers. So usually, like the Nicolas says, but this is nice. It's a much cleaner guide fence of what they actually ought to do. Nice.
I used to be a Pascal programmer, and they used managers in the Apple OS way back. I got very allergic.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard this. Is policy something you use in-house, or is this something you got from somewhere?
I'll post a link. There's a guy who goes through event storming. Do you guys know his name?
I don't remember.
Oh, you were going to say something, Andrea? Sorry.
I was going to say, like, it's not even taking a decision. Like, to express the intent that I want to take the decision for this event is then, because it emits a command, so then the command goes to classic decision taking. That's all. And it's always needed, right? So it's not directly taken in our, like, heads.
Really, it looks like it does, right? The difference between that and the state change is that the command might lead to a state change in some aggregate.
That's actually the very interesting part. It might lead to a state change, but it might not. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you want to issue a command instead of an event.
Yeah.
Because you want all state changes to go through the same pipeline. Command goes into a handler, which runs business rules against the state of the aggregate to determine if the event can occur.
To me, it's a little bit more about the semantics. I mean, you could basically say that all I have is a projection that shows like these are the people I need to that have to call police, right? And then it's up to someone else to pick those up. And there's an SLA as to whether this is a cron job or something that's picking these up, and another system that's creating commands or not.
Yeah.
The line kind of shifts between who's responsible for that.
But we'd see this also as something which deals with compensating actions, right? If something hasn't happened or some kind of mistake was made, this would also trigger under the right conditions an event like payment failed, right? This may lead to a compensating action in an order which has already been, I don't know.
Yeah, event is payment failed. Command is send to CSR to call customer to,
exactly.
Or payment succeeded, release for shipment.
I really like policies for that because it's something which makes sense when you discuss that with business people. Process manager does not, frankly.
But policies match, these are my business rules.
Yeah. And that's how we're expressing them.
And I think that's where I think it's missing in a lot of explanations where they call out queries can be policy. CQRS. Query is something that I ask for. So basically, it's something that an actor might ask for. You know, they can issue a command or ask a query. But where do, in CQRS, where do these kind of things, the business logic rules, people miss that.
Yeah, we got a couple places they live in. We're still debating it, but the BAs who do the event storming, they really like this because we can make it sticky and say, this happens because of that. And the policy can be timed too, right? You can wait 24 hours before you issue the command because you may listen for a state like, let's say auth failed on a credit card. You don't want to kill the order right then. It could be the gateway's down. So just wait, and if eventually you get an auth that succeeded because there's a retry system going, then you never issue the policy to kick out like you can change what command you're going to send because the policy has a timed value to it. So it's like with your cron job thing.
So it coordinates between various transactional scopes, aka
yes.
Yeah. Nice.
I think what you're also getting at is actorless initiation of commands, right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So that's kind of where that's a good example of where you have other systems being the user, because a lot of, even going back to the original UML diagrams, you always had users and user stories, but there's always that other system that you could have as an initiator of something. And this is exactly what this is.
Yeah, that could be that. Queries can integrate. They can change. They can have side effects, which is what? Shouldn't do that. But again, query is just a terrible word. We're going to find a new one. You can use these things to jab all kinds of other things. And it's entirely up to the needs of your system to determine what these are. So I made a list of everything that can fit on a slide and still be legible, of things you can interact with in the outside world that can consume events. And this is...
Could you call them event subscribers? Because that would sound better than the previous slide. Event subscribers can be policies.
We actually internally call these reactions, event reactions. But CQ, the Q part, because I'm trying to go from CQRS to, here's the Q part of CQRS, and I think it's a wording thing.
You know what, again, event reactions are meaningful. You can talk about that with business guys. Event subscribers, perhaps not so much. Nice.
Yeah, because subscribe is passive in a lot of people's heads. Yeah. But this is like the release. This is how a state gets out. And that's really important for any system, of course, is to be able to affect change on other things. Okay, so what we've come to the conclusion is CQRS and domain-driven design, they give us a cultural transmission technology. The words you're using in the events and in the commands match the business. And if you can use those commands and read those events anywhere in the organization, and those for that domain, the language that fits, you've now, in a way, in software, communicated your culture in this technology. So that's good. Okay, let's talk about REST. Change topics. REST, again, the science probably knows a lot about this, so I'll breeze through it a bit. You've got verbs and you've got nouns. The nouns are called resources, and they have URIs or URLs, or however you want to say it, that identify that resource. It's a point in space that has an identified value. You can read that, and you can change state on it by calling delete or update or patch. You can use post to tell a resource to create a new resource. This is a very powerful, simple system that really covers a lot of bases in system design. For the resource-oriented architecture model is actually quite sufficient for many, many things. The representation themselves contain the state, the data in it. And if you're, really going to follow it through, you're going to have links in that resource, that representation that points to other resources and affordances or like controls. So by creating a proper REST API, you can express and do a lot. It's a pretty powerful system. The thing about it, though, is it's CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete is what it is. It's beautiful, it's pretty, you can make graphs out of it, but it's data, it's static. So I think I'd said, so basically the thing about REST is the data is the most important thing. The affordances, the things you can do with the data, that's a secondary concern. and the reason I say this is you can't do an action unless you've got a thing in hand, right? You can't issue a command without having an identified resource to work from. So you have to get to the data before you can do anything to it. CQRS, however, is sort of the opposite. You have events, and that is the central unit of logic is I want to consume events, I want to issue commands. The projections, the actual consumption of it is a projection, and that's a secondary concern. It's important in an overall system, but it's not the primary purpose of CQRS. And the most damning thing I found was, not damning, the hardest part to solve here is that the projections have no responsibilities of affordances, meaning a projection doesn't have to tell you your next best action or what you can do. It's passive. It just tells you things. It doesn't tell you where you can go to change the state of the system. So if you have a REST interface that's purely a projection, there's no way you can look at that and do anything except read it, follow its links around. But if you try to delete it and it's a proper projection, nothing's going to happen because there's nothing there. There's no way to get state change in.
So the client has to know everything, all the knowledge of what to do with the client then.
Yes. Unless you build in something magic here, when you interact with a REST system that's a projection, it's purely a projection. You can't yell at the screen and get the actors to do anything other than what they're going to do already. So our customers love our REST. I'll just qualify that a little bit, but let's say they like our REST. Okay. The thing about our REST is it gives you context-sensitive affordances. So if I get a cart, I will have a link on there that says checkout. So I know if I want to check out, that's the link I follow. With CQRS, you can get the cart, but can't really find out how to check out from the cart data itself. From REST, you have discoverability through links. So I can start at one resource, I can see links to other resources and walk around just like a browse a web page. With CQRS, when you get an event, you got nothing on that thing to tell you what you can do next or where you can go or what it's related to. It's its own little world. And, well, never mind, that they're on. Basically, we also have a way in our current REST to basically denormalize queries. So we have this graph view or graph model, but you can use queries just like SQL kind of queries, but not the same language, but conceptually the same, to pull data all into one request. It's called Zoom. In CQRS, that's an exercise for the reader on the projection side. So I've been looking at something else. GraphQL, how many have heard of GraphQL? A couple of people? Oh, wow, everybody, most people, awesome. GraphQL is a competitor to REST, I'll put it that way. And as you know, it's basically graph-oriented data, just like REST. And it's got what is its primary purpose is to create queries against graph data and pull them in just like our Zoom. We built Zoom long before these guys, so they kind of copied us. I'm going to give you a little example of it because no good talk in a tech audience is good without a demo, and we'll see how this goes. Is that too small? Okay, so this is a API called the Star Wars API, and this is the graphical viewer. This is your starting point in a GraphQL API, and so you get used to it after a while. Believe me. On the left is your root. This is what we would call like the slash, and you can click on it, and you can see inside a root there are all these things you can do. I can look at all the planets, and inside the planets there's a planets connection. So this is kind of yak shaving, but there's these patterns you follow to find things. And that's kind of fun, but what's really fun is actually using this thing to do something. So over here is this query language, and you basically, it's kind of like Mongo. You describe what you want to see, right? So I want to see all films, right? And inside of all films, I want you to get the films. Again, this is a little bit pedantic, but this is the way they designed this particular API. Is that making this all messed up? I think I might. Is that better? Why are you all that color? Oh, because you don't belong there. Yeah, he's got to go. Okay. Okay, got it. It's got these nice helpful hints. And from films, I want to get the title of the film. And that's great. If I run this, I'm going to get the Star Wars films. Fantastic. There they all are. I think they're all there. 1, 2, 3. They're missing one. They're missing a couple. Anyway, that's the way it goes. But, I want to do more than that. I also want to know, in here they have these connections. I want to know in every one of these films, I want to know what kind of creatures were there in this film. And we'll just go name. We could do more, but we'll just do name. And that's my query. So when I run this, I get back for each movie, A New Hope, there are humans, droids, Wookiees, I'm not sure what Rodian is, and the Hutt, right? Empire Strike Backs. I think you get the idea. You construct these queries against a graph-oriented data model, and you get back a flattened or kind of flattened view of what you're getting. So people love this. This is a lot easier to use than the standard REST API. It's the kind of thing that I've been thinking about would be interesting for us in our own API itself. The one thing that GraphQL has that is really useful, and unfortunately this one doesn't let you change this, but in the schema, I should show you one. Hang on, give me a second. Let's try this one. Oh, that's really small, but I'll zoom in anyway. Okay, in the schema, they have these things called inputs. And an input is basically, sorry, where'd it go? Forgive me, mutations, I'm sorry, wrong word. They have mutations. And a mutation looks like this right here. And basically, mutation says, I want to send you data that's going to change the state of the system. So what is that? That's a command. Very nice. What's really weird about GraphQL is the inputs they use are pretty much different than the data you get out. So the query model and the input model have nothing to do with each other. You can't reuse the query data to create actions, or mutations as they call them, which leads to what? A lot of copying, because you got query model stuff going on and change model stuff going on. But stop me, that sounds really familiar. That's kind of what CQRS is. If you really follow it and you don't try and make classes that do two things at once, you're duplicating yourself. So dryness isn't really a goal in CQRS. It's not a goal for this. I feel like this fits CQRS a whole lot more than REST by itself does, because you get the best of both worlds. A way to do projections and create your own projections view, roll your own, as well as a way to express out all the commands and then execute commands against the system. I think I just said all that in this slide. Let me see. Yep, linked data, denormalized queries. Oh, one of the nice things about GraphQL is you have a subscription mechanism. So you can subscribe to two different kinds of things. You can subscribe to a query. So if you write a query, and then you say, I want to be told every time this changes, it opens up a WebSocket, and it sends you events, changes every time that thing changes. It also has another kind of a query where it's like a named query, and you don't really know, you don't get to describe it, you just get to call it and say, this is called the full cart query. And I know these fields are there. So it's basically a pre-positioned data view projection of what's going on. You can't edit it as you see, and it will send you events as it comes through. So you got roll your own queries and standard or static queries, or predefined queries, I guess. And that's pretty cool, because if you think about it, if you're going to subscribe to events and a projection and then create a call response model to read it, that's not as nice as creating a projection that then pushes out to a client directly. Now you can't always do that, but more and more you can, and that's a much nicer experience for people. I like the fact that mutations have different models and they share nothing than queries. My only real problem with GraphQL is those mutations are just a flat list. Here's all the ways you can hurt yourself, right? There's no context as to when you can call these things and when the state of the system is such that you couldn't call these. So I think that's a problem.
Would you have that in regular commands? Like you can issue the command anytime you like usually, and it's up to the command to fail if some precondition isn't met, right?
Yes, I think that's a valid criticism of CQRS, because you have to program very defensively. You always have to guard against failure. You issue a command, maybe it's going to fail.
Actually, I thought it was one of the strongest points. Because you have to, it's called bugs. If you in any other model, you don't program like that. So I actually always saw that as a strength.
We'll talk more, Rabir, because I think it's a strength, but it's also makes the usability really hard, because it's like wrapping every statement in a try catch. What else are you going to do, right? You got to create retry logic, perhaps. Like I saw one CQRS API from a competitor of ours, interesting enough, and they required you to send the aggregate version with every command. And if you got the version wrong, it would reject the command. So the way people develop their software is when they wanted to make us change the system, they would read the thing to get the current aggregate version, send the command, catch the failure if it ever failed, and then do the same thing again. So the amount of work it took just to issue a state change was enormous. You could probably be a lot more optimistic and just send the command and let it figure out if it can run the command again. If it fails preconditions, then it can send it back to you. But the problem still is, when can I check out of my cart? The human has to get the cart and make some decisions based on the data they're in, right? Is the cart empty? Is that a checkout action? I don't know. Maybe. Let's try. Nope, can't check out empty carts. Okay. How about if I put this in, but I leave the payment off? Like, the rules about when you can do something are really important.
I think you can do both. I think you can really safeguard everything with an if statement and be very dogmatic about CQRS, but then you can also interpret that with traditional programming inside your projections anyway. I think that's what people overcomplicate things. I think that they have to do the double verification that you have with traditional kind of stuff. Someone might have tampered with the HTML and sent something that wasn't actually on the page. So we're going to check on server side too. Sure, you do that, but just like that with CQRS, you can have the system not be as thorough, and it depends on what level of trust you want to get. Obviously.
Yeah, it feels like design decisions. We've seen that some people just overdo it. Suddenly there is that nice cohesive point where you can nail it all down. So the temptation, I've done it myself, right? You just nail it down because you can. It's not, like Adam says, not always the best choice, but it's just design decisions.
Like for me, a lot of times is like I don't check whether that command can be executed, and I'm just going to have that in the projection in the page that the checkout button is disabled. And if someone does something like checkout, okay, fine. I guess I'll let the system fail later with like trying to buy $0 of stuff, and that's fine.
So I guess what I'm kind of hearing is saying it might actually be a projections responsibility. If you want to have that kind of, if you want to have that, right? Like in us, it's important. It's important that the client doesn't have to make decisions about when checkout's appropriate.
Yeah,
but if we can compute that,
or do you just want to have it always on and then like, hey, you're stupid to press checkout with nothing in there. Well, I'm going to catch it in the command because it's a little bit more thorough, and I don't have to worry about someone getting a projection wrong, so they send the wrong command. So it's kind of like I don't know, what's your culture, what's your risk profile for this particular state change?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to guard the command always. You can't trust commands coming in. This is really more of ease of use of when is it appropriate to issue a command.
It's always a trade-off.
Yeah,
I think it's always a risk profile. If this is like, if they're going to hurt themselves, or they're going to be suing us, or there's going to be,
or worse, they go shop somewhere else.
They're going to have to issue refunds, and these are expensive.
Yeah.
Then yes, maybe we should be a little bit more diligent and put double checks and double validations. But for most systems, I'm just ready to have a grayed out checkout button.
Has anybody written up an article or something on that? Those trade-offs?
Not really. I mean, all of this I think is really common sense. And where do your if statements exist? And do you trust the person not to tamper with the HTML? And if they do, what's your risk profile? So is it worthwhile doing it?
It's part of your domain modeling process, right? Exactly how permissive do you want to be, or how restrictive you want to be. It sounds like your choices are more permissive with better defaults. The competitors maybe not so much. Who knows?
Well, because we got all those touch points to serve, we want to make sure that they can be as dumb as possible. They can be as reactive as possible. So one way to model it to be, okay, well, we're going to basically create a state element on the cart, and it's going to be checkoutable or whatever. Like you can create, I can create an event that says, okay, this cart is now available for purchase. And if something changes there, they take their credit card away, they add in the cart, you can then issue a state change. And that's probably okay. They may end up going that way because then the projection just has to listen for on off, and then they can
Yeah.
they can project out.
Yeah,
It's
True
you're
or
also
false.
way more involved in the space than someone else. I mean,
Yeah.
you're providing a platform for e-commerce,
Yeah.
whereas someone that just has an e-commerce site for selling pet food or whatever, they're at a much kind of higher, kind of
Well,
primitive level.
the
than you.
problem still exists, though, is that where to go? The projection isn't responsible for telling you what commands are available. If I may have that state saying I'm checkoutable, but I don't know how to map that to the checkout command, right? That's you got to read the words and put the dots together in your head and go, oh, okay, that means this. What I'm actually thinking about in ours is we would give you that list of commands is now appropriate, something like that. Like
You definitely have like way more diligence. I mean, to me, it's just like, hey, the command's always possible. I just, as a user, I can't find the button to issue it, and that's it.
Yeah.
This
And would it be possible to just wrap your commands as your domain objects and then just send back the state saying, okay, these are list of things I can do right now. Like it's the same, right? You're done saying something to the card, you send back a current card state, they subscribe to it, you know whether your checkout button is enabled or not. So you're already doing that already. Then you can also send commands saying that, okay, now your card can be packed on this certain way.
yeah,
That's
There's
interesting.
sort of like the same thing on both sides, right? You either send back your full card state so that the client side can interpret that, oh, I'm good to allow to send button.
That's dangerous because there's a bunch of stuff about read models that allows them to be dumb. And what you're leaking in is the command what's the word, governance, into something that's supposed to be a very low risk part of the architecture. And now if you're baking that in, those permissions into the read models, you've defeated the purpose of read models for a lot of CQRS applications.
But it doesn't mean I'm exposing my low level. I can make my own thing saying that this is a card type, how you can set work on a card type, right?
Yeah, I mean, typically the way I see people divide up a CQRS project, or at least one that has that aspect of it, is that a lot of the junior people would be working on the read models, and you don't want to trust them with being able to determine those critical business rules, which are at the key, like the key parts of those business rules are what commands you can issue and what they do.
I can always double it, right? So it's you have an event reaction which updates with true, false, whether a command is available or something. So it's wrong. So what the command itself when does it validations would validate it again, just like you would do that in traditionally in client server side validations. So
I think you're right. The command's always going to validate that stuff. All those kind of things are common affordances. They're still even timing and scale, those things. Yes, it's checkable. You click in it, and it's going to not be able to check. Some other thing has happened, and you can't check out. So,
well, I just had this thought while you guys were talking, and what's going to save you is this, right? That ubiquitous language. The projection's probably going to call it something really close, or even use the same terms as the commands and events.
yes.
So maybe it's not such a hard ask to say the state of the cart is unpurchasable. That's a word that means something in our domain. When it becomes purchasable, then that, purchase. Like, what do you think, Andrea?
Yeah, even better if your preconditions are declarative, like you declare precondition and test them as data. Maybe you can even from there, already kind of on the projection side, calculate on the fly things, and then now you have the list of commands you can execute.
I mean, for me, it's always the lowest common denominator. I want to be able to take on the most junior people onto a project, and I have no qualms about throwing them into writing read models.
Yeah, the juniors, they are not gonna write the preconditions, right?
No, that's fine, but I don't even want them to worry about commands. I don't even want them to know that commands exist if they're very junior.
Yeah, I don't think it goes in projection. Sorry.
Are you trying to say that command is essentially links in the rest, or links are sort of commands?
Links lead you to affordances, and an affordance could be like a form, or that's the most common one. I want to change the state, but the problem with REST is you have to understand what those 4 verbs are. So if you know that your goal is to remove an item from the cart, you have to understand Like, and this is what the complaint against our API is. Okay, I've got to go to that line item and I've got to delete it, right? How you delete things from the cart is not obvious because there isn't a method called remove item from cart in the API. It's a pattern you get used to, and so you start looking for it, but it isn't immediately obvious. So a lot of people complain that we don't offer a swagger for our API because we really want you to, you know, wrap your brain around this. We're struggling with the risk of having people have to wrap their brain around something else. This, I don't think it's right to put the commands available in the projection, because you're right. How are they going to know if it's valid or not? That's really a lot to ask. So I still think it's an open issue. Trust in the ubiquitous language to get you there is now putting that logic in the client again. The client has to know projection says this, therefore I can do that. And that's hard. I don't want to do that.
So who would legitimately know whether a command is available or not?
I don't know.
I think it's a domain modeling thing, and it's perfectly fine to have a read model which is one of your event reactions, and as a result of say at least one item was added to the card. So the first item added event occurs. And then there's a map or something which says checkout button available, right? You can stream, especially with this modern stuff, you can stream those events straight to the client, right? Straight to your React whatever thing, and which totally legitimately knows about those buttons. Now, whether you put a junior guy on making those decisions into that or not is another matter.
When we look at what we're actually talking about, we're actually asking the question, go back to the word you said earlier, what's the policy for this command, right? So that might be a way of thinking. Maybe the pattern for you and the way, I'm not sure if this makes sense or not, is to, for every command that this matters to you, have a policy for that command.
So the policy would
listen to events and basically
issue the checkout available, checkout unavailable.
Yeah, so basically, I want to know what's the policy for this command.
Yeah.
And you can have what's available. So basically, is this command available? It's kind of what you're asking, but it can be more complicated than that because you have a query, like a policy query for every command on the things that matter to you that you want to say that you kind of expose out. And the command could use that internally as validation or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you can reuse that way.
I think but the fact that people like GraphQL so much is you can bind it to React, right? It's called React for a reason. That's probably where the answer lies, Robert, is the projected state that's coming out to the GraphQL will be tied to a button that will have a trigger that can switch the CSS or whatever. Like, they're going to do that anyway in the REST API. If they see a link, they know then to turn this on and off. It's not that hard to say, if you see this value in this view model, you react to that. You don't have to make a decision, but you can, and then you're tying the button to the command and using that to control it.
I was going to say, just this thought maybe is not relevant, and just as a brainstorming thing, the list of the current available commands, it's basically a projection itself, because it depends on the state. So it's still doable. I understand that there are other concerns, but even the state, I can always come up with a list of available commands. And the state is just the list of events.
I don't know if you can come up with a list of available commands without a lot of knowledge. Yeah.
It is a lot of knowledge and some you want to have. But honestly, is this user allowed to do that? There's so much in that. And what's the state of the current system? It's a little more complicated than just what's the state of the data.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't think so?
Because it's up to the modeling of the problem to define the data that you store. So if you have enough information, you store enough data, then probably it always depends on the modeling.
Yeah, I think that's more to be played about
Because
with.
ultimately, the policy is going to use the same data to enforce the restrictions.
All you have is
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, More to be discussed.
We'll find out.
No, this is good. Well, this is exactly what I was hoping for because it's been very tough thing to think through it. So I saw it 3 months ago. It wasn't possible. Now I'm changing them a little bit, but I still like GraphQL quite a bit, and mostly because it fits CQRS a lot more, as well as it gives us a way to talk about our own company's features as a way to carry forward and with the denormalization stuff. So, and I just did this part, so great. Any questions or any more comments? All right, well, thank you for coming. I should see if anyone's on the phone.
Thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate it. We're going to go to the keg, which is there's a nice lounge at the keg just down the road here. So for those people who want to stay around for a beer and more conversation, that's where we're going. Thanks again for coming. Have a great Christmas. And if you have questions, again, all of us are around.